She stood by the coat check in scuffed shoes and a cardigan that had seen better days. The waiter had asked if she was lost. The hostess had gently tried to redirect her to the staff entrance. And the guests? They didn't see her at all. Not until her name echoed through the crystal ballroom. Not until the auctioneer paused, eyes wide, and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, the single largest benefactor in our institution's history is her." The chandeliers in the Langston Hall shimmered like frozen fireworks, refracting gold and diamond light across marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Waiters in black vests and white gloves moved like silent shadows between guests, offering flutes of chilled champagne and silver trays of hors d'oeuvre, too delicate to pronounce. It was the kind of event where wealth didn't just whisper, it roared, sparkled, and judged. The Children's Legacy Auction was the pinnacle of the city's elite social calendar, an annual affair where New York's most powerful families came not just to donate, but to be seen donating. Women glided in gowns worth the average mortgage. Men laughed in circles tighter than their bow ties. And every movement was watched, measured, documented by photographers hoping to capture the next front-page smile. And then Nora Carter walked in. No red carpet greeted her arrival. No hush fell over the room. In fact, no one noticed her at all, except to assume she was lost. Her coat was a faded gray wool blend, buttoned at the middle. Her dress was plain navy, knee-length, wrinkled slightly at the hem as though it had been packed and unpacked too many times. She wore no jewelry save for a thin silver chain around her neck, its pendant tucked beneath the neckline of her dress. Her hair, chestnut with subtle streaks of gray, was tied back in a low, unassuming knot. No designer touched her. No brand claimed her. Her shoes, flat and comfortable, carried her across the ballroom like she belonged, even though everyone around her silently, and not so silently, believed otherwise. The first hint of judgment came from the coat check. The attendant, clearly used to fur stoles and designer tags, hesitated when Nora offered her coat. "Are you sure you're supposed to be here, ma'am?" he asked, glancing toward the staff corridor behind her. Nora only smiled. "Positive, thank you." She moved past him with grace, oblivious to the puzzled look he exchanged with his colleague. By the time she reached the main floor, the whispers had begun. "Is she someone's plus one?" "No, impossible. No one would bring that." "Maybe she's here to clear tables?" "Oh, poor thing. She must have gotten lost." Nora moved through it all like sunlight through fog. She didn't fidget or try to disappear. She didn't puff herself up or play pretend. Instead, she paused at each medical exhibit lining the walls, quiet booths set up to showcase the pediatric care innovations the hospital hoped to fund. 3D printed organs, child-friendly chemotherapy tools, virtual reality for anxiety management. She read each plaque, studied the photos of children with bald heads and brave smiles. She asked a young doctor about survival rates, about post-op quality of life. Her questions were articulate, nuanced, the kind that only came from real concern. But the doctor, clearly thrown by her appearance, answered with oversimplified, slow-paced responses meant for someone who wouldn't understand the technical side. Still, Nora only nodded, thanked him warmly, and moved on. At one table, a volunteer named Erica blinked at her for several seconds before offering a tight smile. "Hi, are you looking for the kitchen?" she asked, gesturing gently toward the back. "You might have gotten turned around. Staff usually enters through the rear corridor." Nora tilted her head, puzzled but not offended. "Actually, no. I was just admiring the neurology wing proposal." Erica flushed. "Oh, sorry. I didn't." She didn't finish the sentence. Nora offered a soft smile that forgave without asking. Across the room, Miranda Aldridge took a sip of champagne and narrowed her eyes. Blonde, sculpted, and born into wealth so old it was practically fossilized, Miranda was the kind of woman who wore 6 figures around her neck and made it look like restraint. Tonight she wore crimson silk with a slit up to her thigh and a brooch that once belonged to a queen, or so the story went. She was chair of the event's social committee, unofficial gatekeeper of the guest list, and the central sun around which a constellation of elite women orbited. Miranda's circle included Olivia Penhallow, heiress to a diamond fortune, Veronica Stein, a fashion editor and Lucille Grafton, whose second husband's money had bought her an accent she never used to have. They all followed Miranda's gaze toward Nora. "Oh dear," Lucille murmured. "Did we add a community outreach category this year?" Veronica asked. "Maybe she's an intern," Olivia smirked. "A brave one. That dress is determined." Miranda didn't laugh. She rarely did. She leaned over to one of the event coordinators and murmured, "Who is that woman by the donor map? She's not on the press kit list." The coordinator looked, blinked, and offered a nervous shrug. "I'm not sure, Miss Aldridge. She may have come in with the early guests." Miranda's jaw tightened. That wasn't an answer. As Nora studied the architectural rendering of the proposed children's recovery garden, a space with interactive nature features, butterfly sanctuaries, and therapy animals, she stepped slightly too close to the roped-off VIP table area. That's when Miranda struck. "Excuse me," she called out sharply, heels clicking toward Nora like a judge approaching a verdict. "This section is reserved." Her voice carried easily over the ambient music and murmured conversation. Several heads turned. Nora blinked and took a small step back. "I didn't realize. I was just looking at the—" "You're not with the board," Miranda cut in, already waving at a nearby staff member. "Can we please escort this guest to the general seating area?" "I have an assigned seat," Nora said quietly. Miranda arched an eyebrow. "Do you, though?" The staff member approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket?" Nora reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. The man opened it, blinked, then stiffened. "Oh, it's for table 1, actually." Miranda laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "That's impossible. Table 1 is for top-tier benefactors." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. That's what it says." He handed the envelope back to Nora, his expression suddenly unsure. Miranda didn't speak. She just stared at the envelope, like it was a riddle that refused to solve itself. Nora gave a small smile. "I'll find my way. Thank you." She moved on, pausing by a photo display of terminal pediatric patients who had received last-chance treatments funded by anonymous donors. She lingered on a little boy's photo longer than the rest. Behind her, the whispers returned with renewed venom. She must have gotten it by mistake. Someone probably sent her the wrong ticket. I bet she's a plus. One for a rich uncle or something. Probably clings to his coattails. Did you see how she looked at that garden design? Like she could afford a flower. Back at table 1, Miranda circled her guests like a peacock. "Let's just hope she doesn't try to speak at the podium," she whispered. "Can you imagine?" Laughter rippled. Even the auctioneer, moments before taking the stage, glanced at Nora's place card and gave a small, confused shake of his head. But Nora didn't notice any of that. Or maybe she did, and simply chose not to care. She stood at the back of the ballroom now, watching as guests took selfies in front of banners that read "Hope for the Littlest Hearts" and shook hands for photos that would end up in society columns. She observed everything, not with bitterness, not with superiority, but with a kind of quiet mourning, as if she knew the real cost of what these people only pretended to support. She moved through the night like a shadow with a purpose, like someone who had already seen the worst life could offer and decided to show up anyway. The same woman who had been mistaken for staff, redirected to the kitchen, dismissed as invisible, now stood calmly in the very room that soon, so very soon, would have to reckon with who she really was. But for now, she remained quiet. Let them whisper, let them mock. They would remember this night for the rest of their lives. Not for the wine, not for the gowns, not even for the millions raised, but for the moment they realized they had misjudged greatness and called it a nobody. Outside the gala's noise, Nora Carter found solace near the edge of the reception hall, standing beside a quiet water feature few had noticed. The soft trickle of water over black granite echoed faintly, drowning out the clinks of glasses and smug laughter just beyond. From this pocket of calm, she could observe the room like a distant planet, its orbits of power, wealth, vanity. The gala pulsed with an unspoken rhythm. Who was looking, who was being looked at, and who didn't exist at all. For most of the night, she had been the latter, but Nora wasn't here for them. She had already seen the worst kind of wealth that collected people like trinkets and treated empathy like a performance. She'd grown up far from it, in a one-bedroom apartment above a bodega in Newark. Her mother cleaned offices at night and raised Nora by day, with a kind of fierceness that etched itself into Nora's bones. They never had much, but they always had enough. Enough love, enough purpose. And one clunky computer that her mother had found abandoned near a college campus, which Nora spent every hour learning to fix, to program, to understand. By 13, she was building software in libraries. By 16, she was selling it. By 23, she'd launched Carter Logic, a company that started with scheduling apps for clinics and eventually grew into the largest AI-powered hospital management platform in North America. But none of it prepared her for the day her 7-year-old daughter, Ava, collapsed on the school playground. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She remembered the sterile smell of pediatric oncology rooms, the constant hum of machines. The way Ava kept a notebook of butterfly drawings, saying she'd become one once the yuckies went away. Nora had begged, funded trials, relocated across states to find the best care. Her money moved mountains, but not fast enough. Ava died on a Tuesday morning, with her mother curled around her, singing a lullaby through broken sobs. After that, the tech empire didn't matter. She handed day-to-day operations to her board and poured herself into pediatric healthcare, not for press, not for redemption, but because she knew what it was like to beg God in a hospital corridor and come away with silence. Over the next decade, she became an invisible architect of miracles, funding wings, building gardens, sponsoring clinical trials, all anonymously. Her donations always came with the same instructions: no plaques, no photos, no speeches. She believed children should be honored, not donors. But tonight was different. This hospital, Lenox Hill West, had received $30 million from the Sullivan Foundation, an organization she had created under a legal alias. She had come in person not to be seen, but to ensure that her money wouldn't go toward naming rights, velvet carpets, or donor portraits, but to butterfly gardens, child therapy programs, music rooms, and neonatal equipment. If the hospital failed that test, she was prepared to quietly pull the rest of the funding. She hadn't wanted to come. But promises mattered to her, especially the one she whispered into Ava's ear as she took her last breath. "I'll fight for the others. I swear I will." "Excuse me," came a voice nearby, pulling her gently from the weight of memory. Nora turned to find a young woman with a crooked name tag that read Maya, volunteer nurse in training. She was perhaps 22, with tight curls pulled into a bun and eyes wide with nervous kindness. "I just wanted to say, I really liked the question you asked earlier about the impact of architecture on pediatric trauma recovery." Maya paused. "Most guests just ask where the caviar is." Nora smiled, a real one. "Well, caviar rarely saves lives." Maya gave a quiet laugh. "True, sorry, was that weird? I talk too much when I'm nervous." "You're doing fine," Nora replied. "Are you in nursing school?" "First year," Maya nodded, then looked down. "Well, technically, I'm in and out. I had to pause last semester. My mom's been sick, and I'm trying to work extra shifts at the pharmacy." She waved a hand, embarrassed. "It's fine. Everyone has stuff. Sorry, I'm rambling." "Don't be," Nora said gently. "You're doing something remarkable, Maya." Maya blinked, clearly unused to praise. "Thanks. That means a lot." They talked for several minutes, Nora asking questions with the warmth of someone who truly cared, not just someone filling time between courses. Maya spoke about her dream to work in pediatric oncology. "Kids are brave in a way adults forget how to be," she said. Nora's eyes glistened at that. She didn't explain why, not yet. Meanwhile, across the room, Miranda watched with a curled lip. "That woman is still here?" she muttered, gesturing to Nora. "Honestly, she's treating this like a networking event. That poor volunteer girl probably thinks she's going to get a job offer." Veronica laughed softly. "She probably told her she's a startup consultant or something." Olivia sipped her cocktail. She sat at table 1 for 10 minutes earlier before they asked her to move. I heard she even tried to adjust the nameplate like it belonged to her. Miranda narrowed her eyes. I'm calling security next time she drifts too close. This is not a soup kitchen. The night deepened. Auction paddles waved. An oil painting went for $220,000. Someone won a yacht experience in St. Barth's. Miranda made a show of bidding, then withdrawing graciously. Nora remained still, occasionally checking her phone to scroll, but to look at a photo of Ava. She didn't realize she was still standing near the perimeter of the VIP section when a staff member approached and whispered, "Ma'am, the event planner mentioned this is your assigned table. Shall I escort you?" Nora blinked. "Pardon?" "Table 1, he said, gesturing toward the roped-off circle draped in gold linen and studded with name cards like trophies. "It's been prepared for Miss Carter." "That's you, yes?" A few heads turned. Miranda looked like she'd just tasted vinegar. "There must be a mistake," she said, rising from her seat, voice carrying across several tables. "I curated that table myself. That's for board members and verified platinum tier patrons." The staffer gave a tight-lipped nod. "Yes, and Miss Carter's foundation cleared at the highest contribution level. Her ticket and donation ID are verified." Miranda's eyes flicked to Nora. "You?" she said, the word sharp, incredulous. "You must have entered the wrong number when registering." Nora's voice remained steady. "I'm certain I didn't." Olivia leaned over and stage whispered, "Maybe she is a charity case. You know, one of those people who wins a scholarship to rub shoulders with the rich." Nora met her gaze without flinching. "Would that make me less worthy to sit here?" The silence was sudden and cutting. "I'll take my seat now," she said, stepping forward. The staffer pulled out her chair. Nora sat calmly, folding her hands in her lap, the same serene expression on her face that she'd worn all evening. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smug. She was simply present. And her presence made them squirm. Miranda sat again, muttering to Veronica, "If this is some kind of social experiment, I'm going to have words with the board." Olivia smirked. "Or maybe it's Charity Night's version of Undercover Boss." None of them had any idea that Nora Carter had walked through the doors of their boardrooms long before tonight, just in different clothing, under different names, behind foundation lawyers and financial advisors who arranged miracles without red carpets or engraved plaques. Maya wandered by again during dessert, her arms full of donated toys for the pediatric wing. She paused at Nora's side. "Wow, I didn't realize you were one of them." Nora looked up. "One of what?" "You know," Maya said, gesturing lightly toward the room, "the major donors." "I'm not like them," Nora said softly. "I don't need my name in gold to make something matter." Maya smiled, setting a plush elephant on the table. "Well, you matter. Ava would be proud." The name made Nora freeze. "How did you?" "I saw your bracelet earlier," Maya explained. "It has her name on it. Sorry, I wasn't trying to pry, I lost my little sister to cancer too. I recognized the look." Nora's eyes shone, and in that moment, two souls who had survived the same kind of grief connected in a way no gala could orchestrate. She reached into her clutch, not designer, not leather, and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside, a letter. "For your tuition," she whispered, slipping it into Maya's hand. "Finish what you started." Maya looked down, breath hitching. "I can't accept." "You must," Nora said. "We need more nurses like you." Just then, the lights flickered, drawing attention toward the stage. The host was preparing to speak. Guests leaned in. Anticipation built. Champagne flutes rose like crystal antennae. Nora exhaled slowly. The curtain on appearances was about to fall. And the truth, her truth, was about to take the stage. The lights dimmed slightly as the MC, clad in a sleek tuxedo and radiating polished confidence, stepped onto the stage with a practiced smile. Conversations quieted, and the buzz that had swirled around Nora's presence was momentarily replaced by a collective inhale, as though the entire room sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. Gold uplighting illuminated the stage backdrop. a massive rendering of the hospital's proposed children's wing, complete with a rooftop butterfly garden, music therapy rooms, and sunlit recovery suites. A string quartet played a soft arpeggio as the MC cleared his throat and leaned toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice warm and resonant, "on behalf of Lenox Hill West and the Children's Legacy Foundation, I want to thank you for an extraordinary evening. Your presence here tonight and your generosity are part of something truly transformative." Nora sat motionless at table 1, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The name card in front of her no longer felt foreign, it felt earned. Miranda sat just 3 tables away, now visibly tense, fingers tightening around her champagne flute. Veronica and Olivia leaned toward each other, whispering rapidly behind manicured hands, casting sharp glances in Nora's direction. The MC continued. "As many of you know, our goal tonight was to raise the final funds needed to break ground on the new Pediatric Oncology Center, a space where hope and healing can coexist for the most vulnerable members of our community." Applause broke out. Nora didn't clap. "What we did not anticipate," he said, "was the arrival of an anonymous donor who, only days ago, pledged the single largest contribution in this hospital's 127-year history." Gasps rippled, heads turned, brows furrowed, even the waitstaff paused. "This individual has donated, and I want you to hear this clearly, $30 million. The room erupted. Champagne flutes clinked in disbelief. A man near the front muttered, "Must be Wilkins. Or Langston. Only they could drop that kind of money." Miranda's face had gone pale, her red lipstick suddenly stark against her skin. Her eyes darted from table to table, scanning for a recognizable face, a smug smile, a telltale nod. The MC raised a hand. "But tonight, for the first time, this benefactor has agreed to reveal their identity, not for praise, not for prestige, but to speak on behalf of the children this gift will serve and the daughter they lost who inspired it." A hush, a suspended breath. "The donor," the MC said, voice gentle now, "is Miss Nora Carter." It was the kind of silence that bends time. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Then, somewhere in the back, a fork clattered to a plate. Miranda's champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor, drawing startled glances, but not enough to tear anyone's attention away from Nora, who now stood from her chair. The same woman they'd tried to reroute to the kitchen. The same woman they assumed couldn't afford a valet ticket. The woman in flat shoes and a navy dress now walked with calm dignity toward the stage. Nora didn't glance at the tables as she passed. She didn't need to. She could feel the heat of their shame pressing against her like a tide. The same mouths that had whispered insults were now frozen in slack-jawed awe. The same eyes that had scanned her with scorn now followed her as if seeing her for the first time. She climbed the stairs with ease and stepped into the spotlight. The MC, clearly flustered by the crowd's stunned reaction, tried to offer her the microphone with a shaky hand. She took it gently, nodded once, and turned to face the sea of people who had judged her so cruelly. Her voice was soft, but it didn't need volume. Every person in that ballroom leaned forward, desperate to hear her. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," she began, "but I've learned that sometimes silence can be mistaken for absence, and presence mistaken for insignificance." A murmur, a shuffle of discomfort. "My name is Nora Carter. Most of you don't know me, and that's been intentional. I've spent the past 15 years funding pediatric care initiatives across the country, quietly and often anonymously. Not because I'm shy, but because I believe the focus should always be on the children, not the checkbooks." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. Olivia lowered her gaze. Veronica fiddled with her napkin. Miranda sat rigid, expression unreadable. "I lost my daughter, Ava, to leukemia when she was 7. She was funny and fearless and loved butterflies. She believed they were tiny miracles that proved transformation was possible, that something small and ugly could become something breathtaking." Nora turned toward the large display behind her, pointing to the rendering of the garden. "That's why this space, the Ava Carter Healing Garden, will be built first. a sanctuary for children to experience beauty, even in their hardest hours. It won't bear my name. It will bear hers. A soft sniffle came from somewhere near the back. Maya, standing near the auction paddles, had tears on her cheeks. I've walked through dozens of these galas, Nora continued, dressed like this, not to trick anyone, but to see what really matters in rooms like these, who we see, and who we don't. She didn't look at Miranda, but the message landed like thunder. The truth is, wealth doesn't impress me, but compassion does. So does humility. So does the courage of a nurse working 2 jobs, or a child facing chemotherapy with a smile. Nora turned, glancing toward Maya. Earlier tonight, I met someone who reminded me of Ava. Her name is Maya. She's studying to be a pediatric nurse. And she's going to finish that degree, because her tuition's already been taken care of. A ripple of applause began, soft and unsure, then grew. Nora raised a hand gently, silencing it. Please, don't clap for me. Clap for the children who will live because of the research this wing will fund. Clap for the staff who fight every day in silence. Clap for the parents who sit in hallways with nothing left but hope. She let the words settle, let the silence return, not awkward now, but reverent. I'll leave you with this, she said. The next time someone walks into your world and doesn't fit your expectations, ask yourself, is that because they don't belong, or because your expectations are too narrow? And with that, she handed the microphone back, nodded once, and stepped down from the stage. As she walked, the ballroom exploded into applause. It was thunderous, echoing, almost desperate, like they were trying to erase what had come before. Miranda remained seated, clapping slowly, a million thoughts crashing behind her eyes. Guests swarmed, reporters whispered, photographers fumbled for shots, but Nora didn't linger. She made her way back toward the edges of the ballroom, the same path she had entered through, until a hand caught her wrist gently. Miranda. Her voice, when she spoke, trembled. Miss Carter, Nora, I owe you more than I can express. Nora turned, calm as ever. Do you? Miranda swallowed. Yes, I misjudged you. Completely. I acted shamefully. Nora studied her, not cruelly, not smugly, but with the quiet weight of someone who'd carried more sorrow than judgment could touch. Just remember what this felt like, she said softly, and treat the next nobody with dignity. Miranda didn't respond. She couldn't. Her words had fled her lips, and in their place was something unexpected, remorse. Maya appeared again, clutching the envelope Nora had given her earlier. They want you in the garden room, she said. It's time for the naming ceremony. Nora smiled. Let's go together. As the 2 women walked out, the sea of glittering gowns parted without protest. Whispers followed, not of mockery this time, but of awe, and maybe a little shame. Later, in the butterfly garden's quiet stillness, under lanterns that swayed like low stars, Nora stood by a small brass plaque. It read, Ava's Haven, for the brave, the small, and the becoming. Maya stood beside her. It's beautiful. It's hers, Nora said. The night ended not with confetti or champagne, but with the whisper of wings and the hush of understanding finally taking root. Somewhere far behind them, Miranda stood on the patio, watching the garden lights dance. Her phone buzzed with messages from people desperate to spin the night their way. She let them buzz. For once, she didn't reach for image or status. She simply watched and wondered how many Noras she'd never seen before. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful moments like this. Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And remember, it costs nothing to treat someone with dignity, but the impact can be priceless.